this is a very informal show, so
You
go with the flow.
may have guessed.
Yep. I've only been doing it 20 years.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm producer Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, Michael, George and Martha have long been a subtext of this program, but tonight...
Yes, indeed. Over the years, viewers have noticed that Susan and I spar like George and Martha do in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. But our sparring is nothing compared to the sparring that's going on Broadway right now with a superb revival of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, my favorite American play by our good friend Edward Albee, and George and Martha are played by two of the finest actors I know on the stage right now. Amy Morton is playing Martha. Welcome to Theater Talk.
Thank you.
A brilliant performance in August Osage County on Broadway a few years ago.
Thank you.
Welcome back to New York. And Tracy Letts is a terrific, terrific George. He also happened to write August Osage County. And welcome. It's your first time on Theater Talk.
Yes,
Welcome
thanks.
to both of you.
Thanks.
All right, I vividly remember the first time I read Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I was in college. I went to the library. I had to read this play because I was going to meet this man, Edward Albee. And I picked up this play, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? I knew nothing about it. Opened it up and read the whole thing straight through, sitting in the stacks of the library. It was that riveting. Do you remember the first time you came across this play, Amy? When you were first hit by the impact of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
The first time I came across it was the movie. Watching it when I was a kid at home. And my dad, who was a filmmaker, pointing out he said, you know, you can hear the ice in the glass. That's really great filmmaking and stuff like that. So I think I was 10.
Yeah.
And I remember being riveted, but not understanding why these people were so mean to each other.
Yes.
So that was my first encounter with it.
Yeah. And Tracy, do you remember when you first...
I think also probably the movie, though. My father was an English teacher, and I always remember some dog-eared paperback of Virginia Woolf sitting around the house somewhere. And so I think I used to pick it up and read it, and certainly when I became interested in acting as a teenager, it's one of the books that I used to pick up and thumb through and do scenes from privacy of my bedroom, that sort of thing, you know. So I've always been acquainted with the play.
So an academic background, was your family life or household a bit like George and Martha's at all?
No, although I grew up in university surroundings, and so the lifestyle that George and Martha lead isn't entirely unfamiliar to me, though certainly my parents were nothing like George and Martha.
Mine were.
there we have it in a
That says it
nutshell. All right, your interpretation of this play has been praised for taking a slightly different tactic than we've seen before. We often have George as the real browbeaten, wimpy, taken down by Martha, and she's the bulldozer. The balance has shifted a little bit here. A lot of people have commented that in this production, it's George who's really in control. It's George who's sort of the puppet master. Do you agree with how the critics have seen your interpretation? Is it something you did deliberately?
We have done nothing deliberately. We don't do things deliberately.
Let's just see what happens.
You know, Tracy and I are pretty familiar with the play because Tracy was also in a production that I directed years and years ago at the Alliance Theater. And I've always thought of this play as if you have to pick one person, it's George's play.
Yeah.
He certainly is on stage the longest. We were very, you know, we've played husband and wife 7 or 8 times now. And so we're very familiar with each other and the way we work. And so we were, of course, first and foremost interested in the relationship.
Right.
And what keeps them together rather than what's pulling them apart. And, you know, that's sort of how we work on every play, I think. So it wasn't a conscious decision to set out to do some sort of new interpretation by any stretch.
Yeah, no, we sat down on the first day and opened it up to page 1 and started asking those kinds of questions of
Jesus H. Christ, what a dumb.
yeah, what are we doing here? What do we want? What are we willing to do to get at those sorts of questions? We never sort of, because to consider the question of doing something different is to consider what other people had done, and I don't think we ever thought too much about that.
Right. It's interesting, though. I've always, in my interpretation of the play, I've always thought, as you say, it's George's play, because I've felt that they have the agreement, not to mention the child, and Martha has lost sight of the difference between what's real and what isn't, and George has to destroy her to save her, to destroy the baby to save her and bring her back off the cliff a little bit. Is that what's going on in this dynamic here?
Yeah, sure.
It's like a typical playwright. They don't want to. That's not what I intend.
Sure, that sounds good,
This is
Michael.
not-
Let's go with that.
So in other words, what you're saying is that when you're acting and you're putting this play together, all of these interpretations, this overarching idea that we see in it, is not what you're doing. You're just breaking it down,
Exactly.
scene by
You're
scene,
just telling-
moment by moment.
Telling the story. I mean, actors and directors and playwrights actually have no control over how they are perceived, how the play is perceived, and what you take away from this play has a lot to do with the baggage you brought in when you sat down in your seat. So I think there are many people that see this play completely differently from each other. So for us, it's really important to stay truthful to the relationship and to the story. But other than that, that's all. I mean, that's all we're setting out to do, because whatever you take away from it is sort of out of our hands.
Can I ask you-
Something
wait, wait,
no, my turn now.
wait,
No,
wait,
no,
second.
no,
You- I-
no,
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 Michael,
no,
let
Better
me
Virginia
ask
Woolf
a
here.
question.
Martha, your brain
Michael,
again. No, one
let
second.
me ask a question,
quick
goddammit.
This is something I always want to know. This is how it goes. George and Martha, do
But
they
I
have? Do
always
they have?
lose,
Do they have?
and that's the thing.
In your sense of the characters, do they have a healthy sex life?
Oh, what a silly question.
No, why not? That's something Edward has
Want
talked.
to answer that question?
Do they have a sex life? It's an interesting question. I mean, what
You know,
color you're?
we answer these questions separately for ourselves. That's what actors do. You don't always have to have the same,
That's
you
a
don't have to
mundane
agree
question.
on the same history. I've always considered it pretty healthy.
You have.
Yes.
You drink for the entire play. A remarkable.
drink.
You
He
drink.
does not
Yes,
drink
all
for
right, but you are drinking for the entire play. And every time I've seen this show, I've wondered, is he commenting on the psychopathology of alcoholism, bringing my baggage? I made a joke, but that seeing people get wickedly drunk at 4 o'clock in the morning and what happens. I always wondered with Albee if he was bringing that to bear. Was that a subtext that this is about what happens to people when they're drunk like that, or is it just something you don't consider?
Well, it's something we consider. I mean, the fact of the matter is that all 4 of these characters do a lot of drinking over the course of this night.
Yeah, I mean, they're
and,
drugged beyond imagining.
Yes, and it helps explain some of the extremes of the behavior and some of the direction that the night takes. In terms of whether or not Mr. Albee is commenting upon how alcohol is used in a relationship, I don't necessarily feel
Or what it does to
qualified to comment on that. I mean, certainly the indication would seem to be that Martha has a pretty serious drinking problem, if not, in fact, all of them.
And
I think they all do.
But
But
then I would
drinking- they're drinking at different
no. Then I would ask in
terrified.
in August Osage County. Well, you just don't know what I'm up against that I have to do this.
I told you it was you.
In August Osage County, you have the pill-popping mother who's so important. And I mean, was that something that you were considering while you were writing that character? What
sure.
opiates do to a person?
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if one of the things that Edward is addressing in Virginia Woolf is those defenses, those things we do in order to escape reality, and certainly illusion is a big part of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Well, alcohol is certainly one of the doors to that escape for a lot of people.
Yeah, but then one would wonder. What I always wonder is, doesn't that chemical affect who she becomes, and that none of this drama would be happening if she weren't so drunk?
Well, that's a
Yeah.
good observation.
Yes, but one has
No.
the sense that this night is only different from the other nights because they've invited people over to the house, which you get a sense that not a lot of people come over to this house. But that kind of drinking probably goes on with her most nights. It's just now on display.
But how would they do all that bed hopping if they didn't invite people over to the house?
I think
Not to
we've
drink?
invited people over to the house. There's something about this couple
Yeah.
that is igniting this particular night and this particular brand of vitriol.
What do you think it is?
I don't think as a couple, Honey and Nick are honest. We may be vicious, but we're pretty truthful with each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think those two are deceitful to themselves and to each other. And I think that energy gets, I think that we don't like that.
Right.
So
They're also new.
yeah,
Yeah.
They're new.
it's fresh meat.
And you gotta initiate them into the ways of what this little town is like. So, Tracy, when you are in this play, saying these lines night after night, as a playwright, what is it that you admire about Edward's craftsmanship here?
When I'm in the play saying the lines night after
don't.
night, I'm not really thinking as a playwright. I mean, I'm hopefully I'm delivering a very challenging character, and I'm just sort of focused on the job at hand. I think in terms of the way that Mr. Albee's play, or all of his plays, informs me as a playwright, I mean, any playwright who would deny the influence that he's had on them is either unaware of it or they're lying, because clearly his language, his themes, his sense of humor have become very much part of our cultural DNA, not just theatrical DNA, cultural DNA. I mean, he's hugely influential in
Insult humor.
in the American culture, and so clearly doing this play now for hundreds of performances as I have, and being familiar with it even before then, certainly it's informed my playwriting. Though I have to say, on a night-by-night basis, no, I'm not thinking, oh geez, I'll be able to take this and use some element of this in my next play.
Yeah. Well, I always admired this, just the way he orchestrates the tension. You know, the scenes, the build-up, ratchet the tension, and then there's a sort of calming down period as he sort of switches alliances around and then builds it up again, then brings it down, and then, but each time it brings it down, it doesn't go quite as far down before, because the tension just keeps going up. You really could do a diagram of the shifting alliances in this play throughout the night.
That's, you know, that's why he's a dramatist. That's why he's very good at being a dramatist. That's what good dramatists do.
Yeah.
They find a way to take their themes and their ideas and they render them in dramatic scenarios, and that's what Edward does beautifully, precisely, seemingly effortlessly in this play. I read a quote somewhere, I think it was Tina Howe, who said, you almost get the impression from for all the precision that is shown in this playwriting, that he wrote the thing in about 3 days. It has that kind of energy in the writing in this piece. It almost feels like it was written in sort of a mad dash.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, he wrote Zeus Story in about 2 or 3 days, actually. I remember he was living in the West Village at the time, and his career was going nowhere, poetry, novels, and he sat down. He'd never written a play before, and he sat down and he tossed off the Zeus Story in 3 or 4 days in the kitchen. It does have that energy, and I don't think Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf took him that long to write.
We've talked a little bit about this. I think Edward and I are similar in that we consider a play for a very long time, and then the actual writing of it tends to happen in a very, very quick period. I think Virginia Woolf is a play that did not go through a lot of rewrites even after that initial writing process. I think pretty much what is there. Now, he's continued to tinker with it a bit over the years, but what you see is pretty much what was always there.
Right.
Does your energy, I mean, does the energy of this play tax your stamina as actors? You put forth such incredible energy in your performances, and do you ever just come off stage at some moments and go, whoa, how can I do this? Or is it always lifting you?
Yeah, we do every time. Every time.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
There's nothing easy about this. It's very taxing, and we are very tired by the end of the night. And 2 shows is cruel and unusual punishment.
To paraphrase Ethel Merman, this is a story that Elaine Stritch told us. Ethel Merman used to say, "You want to be the star of a Broadway musical? You have to live like a bleeping nun. You want to be an Edward Albee play? You have to live like a bleeping nun."
I mean, I go home, I eat something, I sleep, I stay in bed as late as I can, as I possibly can. I get up, I eat some more, I sit around, I go to the show. I mean, it's sort of...
How lovely.
Do you drink? Do you guys drink being in this play?
Not in this play, no.
Elaine Stritch once said that what she drank depended on what play she was in. Champagne if she was Noel Coward.
Oh, my.
Vodka Tennessee Williams, and bourbon for Edward Albee.
Well, those were the days, yes.
Those were the
All right.
days.
Well, thank you for taking of your precious lying around time.
All right.
Come on and promote the play.
No one can
Say
talk to
okay.
us about theater talk.
It's fine revival of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf by the great Edward Albee at the Booth Theater, to extraordinary performances by Amy Morton as Martha and Tracy Letts as George. I hope you guys will be here with us a long, long time here in New York.
Well, thank you very much.
Don't miss this revival.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.